Welcome to this BBC News special. I'm Lise Doucette. Across the Middle East, Arab leaders are under unprecedented pressure. I'm in London to interview a visiting Arab monarch who's still firmly in power but facing loud calls for reform. Is he moving fast enough to meet the growing demands on his streets? And how worried is he about the growing violence and tensions on his borders, including in neighbouring Syria? King Abdullah of Jordan, thank you very much for speaking to the BBC.
Wonderful, nice to be back.
Let's start with Syria. The Arab League has suspended it. Syria has called for an emergency summit. What do you say to President Assad?
Well, I've spoken to him twice earlier on this year, expressing our frustration and concerns of what was going on in Syria. And I was attempting to reach out, not that Jordan by any means had a perfect story, but we were reaching out in national dialogue to our people. We have not seen any deaths on our streets. And it was an attempt to sort of see how we could help. I even sent the Chief of the Royal Court in the late spring to see him again, to see if we can't work together in bringing the violence down in Syria. And it became very clear to me that they weren't interested in dialogue with Jordan or a lot of other countries, unfortunately.
The last time you spoke to him, I understand, was in the spring?
No, I'd spoken to him twice in the spring, and I sent the Chief of the Royal Court to see him also in the spring to see if we can't look at what we were doing in Jordan as a model to sort of help him in reaching out to the different sectors.
Months have passed since then. There's been 8 months of violence. The United Nations says 3,500 people at least have died in Syria. Do you think President Assad has lost legitimacy?
I think the decision taking overwhelmingly by the Arab League shows that we are extremely concerned about the future of Syria and the way the leadership is moving. But the question that all of us are asking is, will we see much of a difference? And I don't think that the system in Syria allows for much of a change. It's almost impossible for anybody to predict where Syria is heading and how things are going to turn out. But having said that, I personally believe, at least in the short term, you're going to continue to see pretty much the same as we're seeing now.
Do you think President Assad should step aside?
Well, that really comes back to the Syrian regime. My concern is, and my discussions with Bashar, and I've gotten to know him fairly well, I honestly do believe that he has reform in his blood. The vision that he had for Syria on the times that I met him was very encouraging. So I think that the challenge is does the system allow for reform? So even as you said, if Bashar was not on the scene, if the regime brings in somebody else, does that person get it and realize that the world has changed? And that's where I have my doubts.
Well, this is the question people are asking. Is Bashar al-Assad the one who's calling the shots, literally? Is he ordering his army onto the streets to fire on his own people?
Well, obviously he is.
You said he had a soul of reform, but does he still?
Well, again, if you understand Syrian politics, I mean, he's in the front, and the image of Syria is President Bashar. Having said that, both his brother and brother-in-law are very active on the military side. So at the end of the day, like all leaders in the Middle East, we're in the driver's seat, and we have, to shoulder the responsibility of what happens in that country. But I don't think it's a one-man show. I think there is a team there. And again, there's a system that has expectations of whoever is in the driver's seat, unfortunately.
But he's in the driver's seat, and
yes, I mean, so as the president, I mean, and I look at.
But should he get out of the driver's seat?
Well, if
the car is going in the wrong direction, the Arab League has decided they've given up on President Assad. They've urged him to reform. They say he hasn't kept his promises.
Yes, and
therefore they say the solution lies in him, and if he's not the solution, then he should give way.
No, I fully agree with what you're saying, and again, I think
you agree he should give way.
I think that if he doesn't accept the amendments or the expectations of the Arab League proposal by the 16th, in 2 days' time, then definitely we have a major problem with his leadership. I just want to point out, but changing Bashar probably may not solve the problem, because the system that's there, even if Bashar was to go, does whoever come and replace him get it? So I fully agree with what you're saying. We're all disturbed with what's happening in Syria, but I think we would delude ourselves to thinking that things would change dramatically if the individual is gone. I think the problem is deeper than that, and it is the system that, the political system that's set up in Syria.
The U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Jeffrey Feltman told the U.S. Senate committee that most of the Arab leaders he speaks to say that, and I quote, Assad's days are numbered. Would you be one of those Arab leaders?
Whenever you exert violence on your own people, it's never going to end well. And so, as far as I'm concerned, yes, there will be an expiration date. But again, it is almost impossible for anybody to predict whether that is 6 weeks, 6 months, or 6 years.
You don't know?
No, if anybody knew, they'd be a very smart person. So what happens, and I think what we'll have to look at is it just, if Syria is kept in isolation, I think you're going to continue to see what's going on pretty much the same. However, there are other forces at play. There's still the Arab peace proposal between the Israelis and the Palestinians. You have the Arab Spring in general. Recently, we have maybe some height being moved on the Iranian portfolio because of the nuclear issue. The Turks are taking more aggressive stands in the north. What's going to happen in Lebanon? So it's, as you well know, the Middle East is a mosaic of things. And I think the problem that is challenging leaders throughout the Middle East is, if there is life after Bashar, what is that? And I think a lot of people are concerned because the unknown is scaring them more than the known.
So do you, the Syrians have said the Arab League decision is illegal. They want the Arab leaders to meet. Is there any point in still talking to President? Are you still going to give him another chance?
I would imagine if we don't see any improvement by the 16th, then an Arab League meeting will not happen. You know, the Arab foreign ministers have been meeting for several months. The Arab League General Secretary went twice to Damascus. A ministerial team of foreign ministers went to Damascus recently. They met on the 2nd of November, where it looked like the Syrians accepted the Arab initiative. And they met again last Saturday simply because they realized that the Syrians were not moving forward. So I think the timeline has been given, let's see some positive change by the 16th, which is after tomorrow. And I don't see anything in the next 24 hours.
And then what next? They've also invited the opposition to come to Cairo this week. Are you going to be, is Jordan going to be part of those efforts to talk to the Syrian opposition?
Well, if there's meetings,
the same way that you worked with Libya?
Meetings at the level of Arab ministers, and our foreign minister is going to be there. Yes, I mean, we're part of the overwhelming majority of countries that voted for the sanctions on Syria. So we will be able to be present. My concern as Jordan is, Syria is our northern neighbor. We have a humanitarian challenge. We have had refugees come across the border in their thousands, not large numbers as you see in Turkey. So we have to make sure that we position Jordan in a way that can assist whatever may happen to the Syrian people as they come across the border.
Because the Arab League is now talking about protecting Syrian civilians, and they're talking about going to the United Nations. What should be done? Should there be an international intervention? Some Syrians are even talking about military intervention. I
have not heard from anybody in our region or outside any interest of military intervention into Syria, just again because we could be playing with Pandora's box. Do you support what the Turks are doing? The Turks have been
supporting some army officers who've defected.
The Turks are talking about coming into the north to create a security barrier. Now, the question one can ask is that security barrier 5 kilometers, 50 or more?
Do you support that?
Once you move military across a border, it's very difficult to predict the outcome.
So you don't support it? You do or you don't support it?
As Jordan's policy of non-interference, I don't support military intervention into Syria, and there is no country that I've talked to in the world that is seriously considering military intervention into Syria. The only people that are talking about it is a security zone, is the Turks up in the north to protect the refugees because they have so many of them on their border.
President Assad is likely to insist on remaining in power. He still has some support. He says it's armed gangs who are attacking him. Are you worried as the months go by, if it is indeed months, that the region will be destabilized, including on the borders of your own country?
Like I said, Syria is, I think, a case in isolation. You will see more violence continue in Syria, unfortunately. If you were looking at it from the Syrian regime's point of view, with all that's going on as a regime, they're still in a fairly comfortable position.